I was barely 19 when I dazedly sat across the room as a psychiatrist poorly explained my depression diagnosis to me. I had been damned to his office when I thought I had successfully destroyed myself at what had been the lowest moment of my then short and unsurprisingly unexperienced life. I sat stunned. Irrelevant words floated wildly around my head. I wondered, how wrong had I been for longer than I comprehended? Whatever, he's wrong. His explanation was foreign and familiar. Foreign in that the language had never technically been associated with who I associated myself with as a person. Foreign in that I had never been allowed to use excuses for my behavior. Foreign in that I had obviously made my terrible life choices without provocation or reason. Familiar in that I felt every syllable of each of those words to my very core. I understood them in ways his sanitized words would never do justice. I had intimate knowledge of their essences and the impacts they had in my world. As my head was swimming in nouns and adjectives, I realized I could not accept the concept of having depression any more now than I could before a sterile medical term had been placed around the fog that was my life. Depression. That word meant nothing to me. It was not a lack of happiness. It was not abject sadness. For me, it had always been the absence of both. It was the absence of everything. It was an absence of self. In that moment, I railed against such a ridiculous word, just as I had railed against the symptoms that had long sucked the life from me. This was the harshest judgment, one that the universe had commanded against me. How dare this measly stranger be the bearer of such terrible news? How dare he shower description around my being? He sat there calmly as my existence shattered my understanding of who I had always been. He sat not knowing the pain he spoke of, speaking as if it were benign. To him, my cracking apart was simply another Wednesday afternoon diagnosis. I slithered out of that office and tried to forcibly shed depression from my skin. At first, I devoured the pain with blatant mutiny. I unraveled at my seams and cackled foolishly. I thought no one would notice. Sadly, many did not. I soon realized I was overlooked by more than I wanted. I slunk away from the scene of the crimes against myself and acted as though they had never been actors when I had experienced my Eden. The world shrank from me as I was forced to see my skin for what it was. Unremovable, unescapable, unrelentingly mine. Slowly, I began to pick my half-discarded skin up from around my feet. I don't remember if I knew why at first. I simply surrendered myself to the realization that I was naked without it. Eventually, I grew to be patient with my trembling hands as the delicate shell slipped in and out of my fingers. I drenched the desiccated cells with care and attention, realizing that was the only hope I could ever have of knowing wholeness. In time, I came to recognize the urgency of my needs when the depression began to set in. I understood it was never a venomous beast aimed at my destruction. It was a breath. An exhalation. Just like breathing, if forgotten or held too long, it could expel my life from this existence. I could say I had no choice in accepting my depression. I could say it was my fate. I could say many things, but the truth is simple. I suffer from mental health disorders. After years of fighting me, I finally learned to accept the complexion of my character so that I could overcome the pitfalls I set against myself. Today I can stand and tell others that I suffer from both depression and anxiety. But there are times when I force them to suffer from me.